the key is out. If I put the signal on, you can see it comes on. Left, it comes on. Look at the temperature gauge, fuel gauge, all this stuff is on. This should not be at this state with the key off. All right, boys, 2008 Ford F250 5.4. Customer complaint is that it's a no crank. They said someone was working on the car, cleaning and possibly spraying water here with the door open, possibly wet that fuse box. That's what they think, and since then the car wouldn't start. They got an error message supposedly related to the key, so they had a locksmith come out and try to make 2 keys, which they said still wouldn't program, and car's a no crank. Currently the lights on the dash are check engine, and I have communication with all relevant modules. I did notice a less than 2 keys programmed, as in the keys are not programmed. And if they're having problems programming it, we got to see. I can't remember on this model if the keys are stored here in the BCM or if they're stored here at the cluster. A lot of times on these trucks they're in the cluster, so let's check that out. All right, guys, kind of tired, it's late, so I did a couple of troubleshooting steps to kind of advance things. That box, they replaced the used, okay, the gem box, smart junction box, and I found out it has a code, a hard code going from the signal, from the passenger side signal to the bulb there. I removed the bulb and tested directly here at the wire harness, and there is no ground, but it's showing a ground fault, so that box is going to need to be replaced as well. It's not good. Second of all, it's given a code. This is in the instrument cluster. I tried to program the key twice and it won't take it. It just doesn't detect the key, basically. And in the instrument cluster, it's given a U2470, right? So that's saying that it's unexpected ignition status. So that's definitely going to cause problems with programming the key. So we're going to go into the smart junction box, which is that thing, and look at the ignition states to see if they match. There's some fuses you need to check too, and make sure you have the correct power states when you turn the key off and on. Fuse 29, a 5 amps fuse at the top, which is good, and also the instrument cluster fuse, which is good as well. So let's go to the junction box. All right, diagnosis control unit, gem smart junction box, and let's do live data. I know all the codes, like I told you, it's does have a fault for the it also has like an internal fault which comes with the, gets a hard code set, and you just basically have to replace this unit if you have a short, long-term short. Okay, let's see ignition status. All right, let's start with the key in. Let me take the key out. Default key in. All right, it's detecting key in. Put it to key on. Ignition switch, fault status, yes. Okay. Well, it looks like it's going to be the box is the failure when I turn the key off and on. None of these states change, as you can see. I'm going to call the smart junction box on this one, guys. Could also have to do with the actual ignition switch that is failing, it's not passing, but I'd have to do a test on that. But I do know there's errors in this, and it needs to be. All right, back at the vehicle, 8mm bolt to remove this. The customer bought a replacement box, fuse box. He also brought a cluster too. I don't think it's necessary, but he brought one anyway. But let's go ahead and mount this up. Just to know, boys, that's actually 7mm bolt, and also the power cable on this thing, it's kind of tough to get to. There's 2 clips you push, not normally just the one. You got to hit it on the back side too, right? You got to squeeze them in together and then be able to pull it out. So quick note, don't know if I showed it, but I don't remember. This has been a couple of days since the beginning of the first part. This is the connector. I believe this is C2280F, but pin number 14, which I believe, some corrosion there, I believe is 1, 2, 3, something is that one right there. That goes, it's going to be a yellow with a pink tracer, purple tracer rather, and that goes to the, I think that's it there, you can see it right there in the end. That goes to the passenger front signal light, which was not working on the other fuse box. That's one of the reasons why I changed it as well. I tested this circuit and it does make it there to the light line. It was not short or anything, but the fuse box had a hard code. They set a hard code after a while on these modules, and you have to replace them. I might do a video on fixing that too, by the way. All right, I had to put on the booster, put the signal on, left side, and it's also a battery drain issue with that other fuse box or something else. Now we got this working again. So that fuse box was confirmed to be defective. It had a hard code, I believe it's a 1342. You'll see it, whatever it is. And that's a hard code that's set, kind of like an airbag crash code, and you cannot delete it. It disables the module or that circuit. So this driver was shut down. So we're gonna go ahead and connect up to scan the vehicle and see if the new replacement fuse box will recognize the key positions of the ignition. The previous fuse box would not properly recognize the ignition state, which causes a U. I'm going to put the code down there. But basically, the cluster will give an error that it's not in the proper ignition state, because that ignition state has to be sent from this fuse box to the cluster, and then that will cause a no start because the cluster is not properly energizing the transponder to find out what state the car is in to, you know, perform immobilizer functions. And that caused the issue where the key could not be programmed. So we're gonna check that now. I'm just gonna go directly into the module, the GEM Smart Junction Box is called, and we're gonna do the data stream. And let's see here. Okay, this is kind of what we want to see. Okay, not showing any changes here. And I'm trying to crank, so either there's something wrong with the settings, the ignition, or I'm looking at the wrong values. But let's see. I'll bring it back in a second, guys. Okay, I just came back into the cluster just to check the codes, and here's the code I was talking about, U2472, unexpected ignition status. So this is reported between the fuse box and the cluster to know when to energize and do different things for the immobilizer system. So if there's a problem with that system, you can have a no crank. There's a PATS error there. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, the PCM identification, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and clear these codes and see what comes back. I haven't cycled the key. I just want to see if anything just comes up. Okay, now I'm going to cycle the key. Off. On. Okay, that's fine. We don't have the ignition error right now. Let me do a crank. Okay, let's see. That's a good thing. I'm going to go ahead and try to program the keys now, guys, and let's see what happens. So we just back out, go to the top here, special functions, body, security, PATS functions. By the way, guys, the system I use, like I said, I've got it on its launch-based system. I've got it on the website. Click the link in the description if you're interested. 10 minutes, yes. I'm running on my phone, but it's going to come with a tablet, 10-inch tablet. So check it out if you're interested, guys. I'll bring it back in a little bit. All right, guys, we're back. We're in now. Give us access. We're going to go to, we've got to do a parameter reset. I can't remember in this model if I need to do that first or after the keys. Let's try that. We've got one already in and on. Okay. Let's see. Let's try parameter reset. Okay. All right. Says it's successfully done it, which could not be done previously with the other fuse box. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I didn't check, but it was previously showing no keys in the cluster. And since that I'm already in security, I'm just going to go ahead and erase it. They made an extra key, so we have 2 keys, so we're going to go ahead and try it. I'm going to go for it, because I don't want to have to come back in again. It's a 10-minute wait almost. All right, here's the steps, so we're going to do that, guys. Hey guys, if you saw that, it did not work. We were able to do the parameter reset, but we've back with the second fault that we had, where the cluster does not recognize the state, and also the fuse box is showing wrong ignition status. And while I was sitting here doing some research on the actual fault, I noticed the cluster's on. Okay, so as you can see, it's cycling through different fault stages, and you can see the transmission, the park light is on. As I sat here with the key off, I believe this should actually be off. This should not stay on like this. That's probably also causing the battery drain. So there could actually be a fault in the ignition or the cluster itself. So I've got to troubleshoot and see where the fault lies. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be at this box at this point, because we've got 2 and a similar thing was displayed. So I think the fault is going to lie elsewhere. Maybe one of these 2 modules we're going to see here in a second. Let me show you guys something. Look at this. So this is where we're going to start our troubleshooting. As you can see, B2A20 is us, and it basically means that it's getting a key is in the start position, which it is not. For 15 seconds, I've never done that. So that's a good indication that there's a fault in possibly the ignition switch. So we got to test and see where it is. Guys, just to confirm, we do have an ignition switch fault, or state fault rather. Where the fault is, we got to determine. But the key is out. If I put the signal on, you can see it comes on. Left, it comes on. Look at the temperature gauge, fuel gauge, all this stuff is on. This should not be at this state with the key off. So we got to get to the bottom of this. We're going to pull the cluster right now. This pops off, and then we can remove this trim, and I believe there's 2 screws up here, and we're going to get this cluster off. They look like what, 8, 7? We'll see. 7mm. 2 more. 1 there, 1 there. Looks like 2 in the cluster right there. And there's the connector. I'm gonna pull it off. Since we got a used cluster sitting here, why not just plug it up? Let's see what it does. Used cluster plugged up. Look at that. Same thing. Signal on, signal off. It's still in the wrong state. Looking at the wiring diagram, we know that the starter relay gets energized on start, right? So I'm gonna test to see if any of these I've got the key on have power, and they do not. And the main feed for the starter relay does have power, but the outputs, the control side does not. So that means there's no power going here. Okay. All right, it's been about probably 40 minutes since you last seen. I went ahead and pulled open this because I decided to, I was going here and trying to check the circuits coming from the ignition switch, and then I said, you know what, let me just go to the switch, because it's a good chance the switch is the failure, and I can test directly at the switch. I can see the wires coming from it, because the diagrams I had, the colors weren't exactly matching, and I just didn't want to be spending a lot of time trying to figure it out, which colors are which. So I said I'll go to the switch first. It took me a long time to freaking find a tool, 5.5 millimeter. I ended up using an E8 to actually get the bolts off of that thing, the bottom part of the for the ignition switch. Anyway, here's what happened. I went ahead and put everything back. I didn't notice it before, but the big relay right there in the center, that's the that's usually accessory delay relay. It was missing from that fuse box. I put it in. I just took it out of that one and put it in. Not that I think it has anything to do with the problem, but once I unplugged the ignition switch from here, I just kind of did an inspection, look at the wires to see if I saw anything. I did not notice anything strange. I plugged it back in and plugged just to see, you know, how it's behaving with the key off and on. And guess what? Put the key on. Let me put the signal so you can see. Signal's working fine. Turn the key off. The problem is gone, guys. Now it's working as expected. As you can see, the flashing light, the security light, that's because now it's like in the off mode as it should have been all the time. And that's what was causing the whole problem, right? So if I put the signal on, as you can see, nothing comes on. The whole cluster's out. Put the key in. And there it is, normal, as it should, right? Off. You see? Now it's behaving properly. So here's what I do know. The problem was not the cluster, and at this point the problem is not this fuse box. Did it have to do with that relay in there? I don't think so, because that one had it and it was still doing the same thing. So it's not the relay. So most likely the fault, of course I was in the fuse box up there in the front. I pulled out the relay, did some testing. All of that was fine. That was the starter relay. It had nothing to do with this issue, really. I did do some testing at some of the wires to see if I had powers on some of the connectors there I was about to show you, but the colors weren't matching up with the documents, so I didn't, that's why I ended up moving here. Like I said, all I did was disconnect this, the ignition switch, and reconnect it, right? Visually inspected the wires, they look fine. So in my opinion, the most likely the fault would be here, the ignition switch, but that's not confirmed. There's no way to confirm it at this point unless the fault comes back. I have to have the fault to be able to troubleshoot the fault. Now that we're in a no fault state, I'm going to go ahead and program the keys and start this vehicle. I'm going to just show you the process again, because somebody's probably going to ask. Yes. All right, we're going to wait for 10 minutes. I'll bring it back. All right, we got one in. Looks like most likely it's going to be the switch, boys. If I unplug it, of course I lose power. Plug it back. See, the cluster's behaving as it should if the switch was, the key was off. See that? It's like it's switching to a different mode. Looks like it's going to be the switch is faulty on this one, boys. I'm going to call the switch. Key on. I might be on low on power too right now. Okay, this is working. Let me turn the key off. See that? It's staying on. That should not be happening. I pulled out the plug. I'm gonna have them get another switch, and we're gonna continue. Guys, here we are next day. I removed the ignition switch. This is the original one. Customer went with aftermarket Duralast. Here's the part number if you need it. It's plugged in, and now we're going to go ahead and test it. When I do put the key off, it does go off. You see the fuel gauge on. It responds properly. Your fuel went up, crank, off, fuel gauge went off. That's bad behavior we were seeing. The fuel gauge would stay on with the old switch, right? Now you remember with the old ignition switch, we had problems. I'm here in the Gen box, smart junction box, and we're looking at the different states. So you can see we have, let's see here. Right now it's in the off state. I've got the key to off. So we were seeing no changes in these statuses on the old switch. Now I put it to ACC. You see it went to yes. I'm going to put it to run. You see it went to yes. Now I'm going to do a crank. And there it is. You see that? Now it's back to the run state. I'll let it go. And I'm going to put it to off. And there it is in off. So that is the correct behavior we should have been seeing. So that pretty much confirms it was the ignition switch that was faulty as well on this vehicle. So let's continue now with programming the keys. All right, I'm decoding and cutting another key. All right, we got the cuts. All right, looks good. Almost there. I got your keys program. It's got another issue. It's not starting. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. All right, to sum it up, this is crazy. This is a little bit more advanced than what was the last time I left off with you guys. I think I replaced the ignition switch with you guys, but starter relay is where I'm at right now. I've got everything working. I programmed 2 new keys. It would not take the keys for nothing. I battled with a lot of different things. It was crazy. After I took care of all the ignition issues, still wouldn't program. I cut 2 new keys, and it finally took the 2 new keys. I have 2 keys programmed, which enabled the PCM to start. Now I pull the starter relay. It's not starting though, it's not cranking. I pull the starter relay, and this is the, from the PCM controls the ground and the power. And the power side is getting power, but the ground side, I'm assuming, is not grounding because unless the relay is bad, which I don't think it is, because that relay was the PCM relay, I believe. As a matter of fact, let me swap that relay. Be right back. Okay, we probably did have a potential bad relay. I swapped the relay. I pulled out the trailer relay, which was next to it right here. Sorry about that image, guys. Number 55, and I put it here to the starter relay. And it attempted to crank. Battery's low. We're gonna swap the battery, and this car is done. Man, this was a pain. The biggest problem, on top of figuring out there was an issue with the ignition, was the keys. I'm telling you, I spent a couple hours because I tried the 10-minute waits with different, I even brought the original Ford IDS to do it, but I was able to program it in the end with my phone. But it was right now, I believe, this was actually, I believe, the PCM relay, which was here, which also could cause this type of fault, right? So I swapped it out, and somehow I ended up having it in the starter relay position, so I believe this is also a problem. But we're gonna swap the battery out, and we're gonna see what's going on. All right, guys, this one is done. It's a fix. Started right up. So it was, man. All right, to sum this one up, guys, originally a customer told me that the whole problem started when the truck went to the car wash. Went to the car wash, somehow they possibly washed around there on the passenger side door and possibly got the fuse box there wet, the gem module. So the mechanic then replaced the gem module because supposedly there was a fuse that was blowing and they had to pull it out to make the car start, and then it just stopped working completely. So he replaced the gem module and it still wasn't starting, and he had an issue with the key or something, and he called out a locksmith. The locksmith tried to program the the key. He cut a new key and he couldn't do it. That's when I got called out to the job. Okay, so I immediately did a scan, went to the gem module, and saw that there was an error, which I believe you've probably seen it, but it basically had to do with a circuit was shut off, right? The gem module permanently disables itself, or a certain driver, right? After it has a certain amount of errors, right? So, which I'm sure could, because it's a software disable, it's not necessarily that the hardware is bad, by the way. So that could be something that could be overwritten on the EEPROM or whatnot. But anyway, that's besides the point. So I told the customer that the gem module that they put in was bad, and the driver that was disabled was for the passenger front signal light. I tested that the cable, as I showed you, at the bulb, and I had no ground. It was perfect. I sent current to it. It was fine. So I knew at that point that gem module was defective. So I didn't want to do even much testing with that, knowing that I had faulty hardware. They then brought me another gem module, which I installed, and the problem went away. Signal was working, but we still had, of course, no start condition. Couldn't program the keys. That's when I noticed there was something very strange in there about the key state or ignition state. It was not communicating properly. Even with the replacement gen module, it wasn't showing the state of the ignition. So I tried to hunt down at the gem module where the wires are that comes into the ignition to see if the ignition is even setting it properly. I had conflicting documents, so I chose to go an easier route and disassemble the ignition switch and just go right there and test it there. And in the disassembly of the ignition switch, the problem went away. I then noticed that, you know, the start with the key off, you know, the cluster went off completely as well. So, but in the process of trying to program the key, the same fault condition came back. Unplugging the ignition switch causes the fault to go away. So then at that point, I do the math and I'm like, okay, this is most likely related to the ignition switch. I would really doubt wiring, because it would have to be right then and there, but it always goes away once I unplug it. So I had the customer bring another ignition switch. New ignition switch installed, the fault went away. Now in the gem module, it shows every ignition state: key on, ACC, run, and crank. All of that was working perfectly at that point. So the ignition switch failed. And I even believe it's possible in the whole beginning, you know, sometimes the customers think one thing, an event, is what caused their problem, but it's just bad coincidence, bad luck, right? I think maybe the water had nothing to do with the problem in the beginning. I don't know. I've never tested the original gem module. I only had that bad replacement, right? But most likely his ignition switch just died and caused this whole problem at that time at the car wash, and he automatically assumed that it was water that caused it from the car wash. I had a similar situation. One customer, he brought his car to be detailed, to wash the engine, everything. He called me later on that evening and said, hey, they messed it up. He thinks they put water in it, the car wouldn't start. I went and did a Diag, and it came out to be the ignition switch as well, which had absolutely nothing to do with the car. It's just coincidence. Sometimes it happens. Anyway, now, once I got the ignition switch working, I tried to use the various tools, and they would not register the keys. No matter, I tried to add keys, I tried erase all keys, and it always failed. It would keep saying, with the launch, it would tell me that the key is possibly already registered. And the funny thing is, the cluster always reports that the master key is present, which also was kind of throwing me for a loop. Kind of makes me think like it's in a open state, because right now it has 2 keys present. Well, let me continue. What I ended up doing, I went and got the 2 keys that he had would not take at all. It would not program. I tried various different methods. So finally, I went back with my phone and I cut 2 brand new keys, aftermarket keys, and I was able to then, once I had the keys erased, turn the ignition off, turn it on, and it was able to read the brand new key that I put in there, and it programmed those 2 keys into the system. Once I had 2 keys learned into the cluster, it then enabled starting, right? So I was able to then start the vehicle, but I was in no crank. And what I did in testing, I did a lot of testing, guys. I just couldn't record it. I was tired. It was late. In testing, I pulled the starter relay, which you saw, and I also pulled the PCM relay, because that fault can also be caused by the PCM relay constantly being on and energizing that circuit as well. So I had to test there, and also I pulled the starter relay to see if, you know, if I had if I was getting power and grounds and all of that stuff there. When I did that, I actually swapped those 2 relays. And the relay that I ended up having in the starter position when I recorded earlier was, I believe, the relay that came from the PCM. So it's also possible they had a bad PCM relay, because that relay would not start the car. I then, when I did that testing with the Tesla, okay, I'm like, I got power. The PCM is sending power to the starter to crank, so why wasn't it cranking? So I'm like, maybe the relay is bad, and that's the PCM relay that was originally on the PCM, which means they had multiple faults. Of course, swapping that relay, it started right up, guys. So, man, in closing, you can always take what the customer gives you as far as what could have happened into consideration. That usually weighs heavily, but you cannot only go on that, because as you saw in this instance, even though there was some issues at the gem module, the gem module was not necessarily the cause of the main fault of no start. It was the ignition switch, which, you know, the customer wasn't privy to, right? So that's it on this one, guys. Like and subscribe, click that thumbs up button. If you didn't know this, boys, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. See you on the next one.